Are you tired of watching shows that only give you general social media theory and expect you to figure out how to apply it to your own industry? Join us for this week's episode of Social Chatter, the industry's longest-running social media marketing news talk show. Not only will you learn the latest breaking news, but you'll also gain practical advice on how to apply it. Now here's your host, Christian Karasevich.
Welcome everyone to Social Chatter. It's actually your co-host, Sarah Monroe here, and I have been at Social Media Marketing World all this week, and our episode 335 today is going to be about all the things that we've learned here in San Diego, and I also encourage you to check out our social media platforms because I'm going to be posting all of the selfies that I've taken with all of the guests from Social Chatter over this last year that we were able to catch up with here in San Diego. And to start the show, I have a special surprise. One of our longstanding guests who's right here, Doreen morin-van from Morin Media, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's so great to be able to hug people this week. I mean, I was masked most of the time, but Doreen and I have been roommates all week with another friend from Vermont. And yes, cheers. We're going to share we're going to share a little bit about what we learned today or this week. We learned this week at Social Media Marketing World, just some of the trends. We know that there's been some news. There's been a little bit of news from Instagram and NFTs, but lots of other things that we talked about. And then we're going to talk to Paul Bradley. I was able to sit down with Paul Bradley, who's the head of global community at Agora Pulse, about a new initiative that they are launching called Social Media Pulse Community, which we're actually both a part of. But before we get started, Doreen and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we saw that were talked about this week at Social Media Marketing World. And I think, you know, for sure, the biggest one has been cryptocurrency and NFTs and what that's going to mean for the digital space as a whole. I mean, what we're hearing is that crypto is still early. It's still not too late to get into crypto and actually make some money, right? Because we're sort of on the up curve of that. But really what's in the very much the innovator stage, the nascent stage is NFTs.
Right. But before we go to NFTs, let's talk about crypto for 1 second.
Okay.
At his closing keynote, Mike Stelzner announced that this fall, Social Media Examiner is having crypto event. I'm assuming right here in San Diego, but there will be a crypto event in San Diego put on by Social Media Examiner to people who put on Social Media Marketing World. So, you know, listening to the trends, it's going to stay. Yeah. So definitely check it out, and it's not too late to get into it.
Right. And chances are they will have a live stream, I would think, because we tested out live streaming here this week, and it went pretty well. I mean, like all live streams, there's some glitches, which is why we're recording this morning too. But I think they'll probably have that as part of their part of the thing. But it's very exciting. And those of us who have been here for the week are actually getting, for some of us, our first NFTs, thanks to Social Media Examiner too. So it's interesting. NFTs, there's plenty of things to learn online, but really what's great is that you can keep your intellectual property. Yes. That's really what it comes down to for us as creators. And when we say creators, we're creators. Right.
We are, right? Yeah.
Anybody who publishes content, whether you are in-house marketing, you're a consultant, you are a creator of content as well. So anything else you want to say about NFTs?
No, just play with it. Play with all these things. Play with crypto, play with coins, play with NFTs. Even the people that I admire that have been in this way longer in marketing than I have, say they don't understand everything. They said, just go play with that stuff. Make an account, go get NFTs, just play. And I think that is really sound advice. They did say there was a lot of stuff out there, especially with crypto, that's spammy and, there's just, but there's also good stuff and they don't see it going away.
Right.
And so get in it. It's not too late.
Right. Well, that whole piece about trusting where the source is, I think that was the theme that I've picked up this week too, because we had, especially with the Instagram folks, the Instagram presenters, there was one presenter that had very different information because they work with very different clients. I think we kind of got into what kind of clients they work with, what kind of accounts they work with. And so the advice that they were giving was much different than all the others, which really comes down to what we teach our clients, right? Is to really trust what works for you.
Right. So you have to adjust your strategy, your social media strategy, even per platform, on who you're trying to reach and what your goal is to be on that platform. Because like you said, there was one presentation that everybody walked out of about Instagram that was completely opposite advice of everybody else who had talked. And then when we were discussing this last night, we're like, well, I know what kind of clients this person has, right? So their objectives are really, really different than everybody else's. So it's important to go when you're learning things or when you're reading things on the internet and when you're researching things to really think beyond, well, this is advice that it works for them. It's going to work for me, right? It's really important to keep testing and to dig a little deeper. So, if somebody gives you advice to, post 3 times a day, what industry are they in, right? Who are they talking to? And if somebody says post only 3 times a week and do 10 reels a day, who are they talking to? Right. And then of course with your strategy, you need to know about budget and all those other things. So we're kind of filtering the information that came at us, but I thought it was really cool that people talked about the same platform in a very different way.
Different ways.
So I just hope that people in attendance and it was just kind of like a reminder. I mean, I hope that people realize that don't take that for the truth, take that for another way to look at your own strategy and go test it.
Right. Test it. That was definitely, everybody said that same thing, is test it. Now you got to hear some of the LinkedIn pieces, right? And you had some great updates and great tips from those sessions.
Yeah. So I ended up going to a few sessions. I did mostly networking, which is what I do when I go to Social Media Marketing World. But I have a LinkedIn newsletter. I have Creator Mode turned on, which is very exciting. And I had just recently done a Creator Mode presentation. So I thought I knew everything about Creator Mode. And then I found out that just very recently, you know how you have that featured section right underneath your profile information, your about section, you can feature one of your most popular posts or an important post. Well, now you can feature your newsletter. And it says right there underneath your information, subscribe, as a subscribe button. So you can feature that. So that's something new I learned. And then the other thing I learned is I knew you could ring the bell. It's a bell on the right side of somebody's profile when you either go on mobile or on desktop. But I didn't know if you push it twice, what happens. So if you click the bell once, you see all of their updates, whoever's bell you click. So say I go to Sarah's profile, I click the bell, everything that Sarah posts, I get a notification from LinkedIn. If I push it twice, I get her top information. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, so for me, what I heard, the big buzz was around YouTube and about LinkedIn. Those were the two. I know that there were a lot of sessions about TikTok, but strategy-wise, YouTube and LinkedIn. And as I was thinking about why are these two, they're long-form content. LinkedIn now has newsletters, has articles, YouTube videos are longer. And if you're strategic on social media, it's better to start with long form content and then you can create smaller pieces of content for that. If you're a content creator and you mainly do short term, short form content, little TikTok videos and all of that, your audience might get either tired of that or you don't have that follow up. So YouTube is still the king, right? And,
absolutely.
And there were sessions on YouTube ads and, all kinds of things that was really, really important. So YouTube and LinkedIn for me stood out as the two for the long-term game. Just really go in there. And of course, we know LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok are great as well. But those were the ones that I went to and that I found very interesting. Right.
Yeah. That longer form content came up in the Facebook sessions too, because I went to Mari Smith's talk and she was talking about 5-minute videos greater than 5 minutes uploaded to Facebook seem to be doing better. And it gets to that whole longer form content. We've seen all year a lot of TikTokers move to YouTube. We've talked about it on the show quite a few times about how they're going to those longer form content because their audience wants to see more from them. They want to be able to interact more with them. And that's something that you can't get on TikTok. So again, that's listening to your audience. I think that's what everybody says. And you're actually going to hear it in my conversation with Paul Bradley, which we're going to get to next. But before we do that, any other big message that you came away with?
From social media marketing world,
Yeah.
I think that we are ready to meet in real life again.
Yeah.
And there is no substitute for Zoom meetings. As much as I've enjoyed, having birthday parties on Zoom for 2 years, it is really nice today to be able to go to a brunch and see friends for real on my birthday. It was amazing to hug people. I have to say it was a much smaller crowd than I was used to, but that felt safe. Yeah. And it was just so nice to see people, smiling faces, shake hands, have a coffee, just really be with people. That's what I came away with, that there really is no substitute. And as much as we try, you need that human connection. And so if you're ready, pick maybe one or two and go out and go meet up with some friends. It was really, truly magical this week.
Yeah, it really was. And do what feels good to you, right? Because I wore a mask the whole week. And I have to say, I met people, I may have seen them on a Zoom call or a Zoom webinar, but I never would have had the chance to talk to them had we not been standing next to each other in line or sitting next to each other in some of the breakout rooms. So it really was. And now they're going to be lifelong friends.
Absolutely.
And it's people that I just randomly met in line. So, and other people that I'm able to offer some of my experience or some of my connections to help them out. So all those people who met me this week at Social Media Marketing World, you're going to get a lot of email from me this week. But before we close up with Doreen and get to our interview with Paul Bradley, Doreen, how can people find you?
All right. I am morin-media right there on Instagram and Twitter. And I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, Doreen Morin-van Dam. On LinkedIn, look for the orange glasses. I wear them online and offline as a nod to my Dutch heritage. Yeah. I explained that a lot of times this week, which is awesome because, they're like, orange, what is the significance? Do you like Agora Pulse? Which I do. I love Agora Pulse. So I'm excited to have Paul on the show. But it's because I'm Dutch. So anyway, connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram on Twitter. Those are the best places.
Okay. And so with LinkedIn, let's give one more little LinkedIn nugget because you're using LinkedIn creator mode. Yes. Which means if people want to connect, you can follow her very easily. But if you want to connect with her, you have to click those 3 little buttons next to follow and it'll drop down and bring up connect so that you can message Doreen and let her know that you saw her on Social Chatter. And as I say every week, you can find me across social media at Sarah Monroe VT. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, please drop me a note and let me know that you saw me on Social Chatter. We're going to go away. Christian is actually going to close the show. And for now, we're going to jump to my interview with Paul Bradley, who is the head of global community at Agora Pulse, and he's going to talk about social media Pulse community. So enjoy that interview, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Social Chatter World. This is Sarah Monroe, and I'm here at Social Media Marketing World, and I'm here with Paul Bradley, who is head of global community at Agora Pulse. And this week we're going to change up the show a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the news that we're hearing here at Social Media Marketing World and talk to Paul about community, because this is one of the big trends that's coming up in social media, right? That's what we're hearing today, is that it's more than just messaging and groups. It's actually building a community, right? As a trend in social media. So what is it that you're seeing, and why is Agora Pulse going into this community field too?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Sarah. Yeah. So community, I've been in community for about 10 years, and I had a consultancy before I got my first community management job, where I was a Twitter growth hacker, and voice development person, and I had fallen backwards into that from blogging. I had a blogging client who said, "Are you a social media expert?" to me in 2010, and I said, "Of course." And then I had to become one, right? But I haven't been a social media expert for years, right? I just transitioned into that. I ended up doing a community management job at Intel, and then I spent a huge chunk of time at ADP. And whatnot. And so while community is a cool trend right now, it's actually been what I've been doing for 10 years.
Right.
And those of us who are early adopters in enterprise community have kind of always been waiting for the day when people would care about us.
Yeah.
And so I had always said to people, you know, there's going to be a day when community becomes ubiquitous across
Right.
industries,
Right.
and that when that day comes, I'm going to have a lot of it on my resume.
Yeah.
But we had all kind of resigned ourselves to the notion that that might take a while.
Right.
And so I would say that sometime right before the pandemic, a couple of things happened where specific people in the community industry kind of upped their profiles, became big consultants. There were a couple different communities that galvanized the community management audience. And then when everybody went inside for COVID, companies really doubled down. Suddenly community had a moment, right? And that
Right.
moment has been really lasting for about the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who had it on our resumes, much as I predicted,
Right.
but I really thought it would be another 5 years before we actually had a kind of a renaissance, or not even a renaissance, just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that the pandemic played a role, but also, you know, it's online community is becoming ubiquitous in life. You know,
Right.
the people who respond to your Instagram photos, right? That's usually a finite group of people. That's a
Right.
community, right?
Right.
And so as we talk about community becoming a thing, it's because it's becoming everything.
Exactly.
You know,
yeah. And even things like your long lost relatives,
Yeah.
your high school friends, your neighborhood friends. It doesn't matter what country you're in. You've been able to connect with them all over the world, right? And I've heard the U.S. Surgeon General has talked about when we're doing the doom scrolling, right? People are just spending hours online looking through things and just scrolling and scrolling. What the research is saying is that after the first few posts, you get the information that you're looking for. The next thing that you're looking for is connection.
Yeah.
Right? And you used a little phrase here that not everybody may know, enterprise community.
Sure.
Which is different than when we talk about social media community and some of the maybe Facebook groups, or back in the day, the LinkedIn groups, right? So let's explain the trend for enterprise community, because that's different, right?
Yeah, so enterprise community is really about connecting to a brand and getting your problem solved. So the kind of communities that I've worked in have largely been support communities. So for instance, at Intel or ADP, you had some products that people needed to know how to use, and typically their only avenue for figuring things out was to call, right? And that's a little bit antiquated in this day and age.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but a large swath of people want to get their solutions online. And so companies are motivated to do that because, as we all know, as consumers, companies don't necessarily want you to call them. Nice way of putting it. And so that's the world that I was in for a long time, was call deflection. And so while call deflection was the ultimate goal that I would surface up to an executive, that wasn't how I thought of it. I thought of it as, let's make this a nice experience for people. Let's get their problems solved. Let's get them back to work, right? Let's make sure that people can get things done, get things executed, and not feel lost. And so the way I always thought of it was, and this was born out of a guy came to me at an ADP thing once and said, you know, there's this post that I have bookmarked in your community, and it's about something I always forget, but that everybody expects me to know because I'm the expert in this category at my company. And I always forget the answer. And so people will ask me on a call, and I'll quickly hit the bookmark, and I won't miss a beat, and I will come up with this answer. And that really means so much to me. And that in a microcosm is what the power of it. And so why that's having a moment is because that's a meaningful way for people to connect with you as a company, right? Like if you're helping them, like, you know, there's so much out there where you think, oh, this company, they're selling me this product because they want it to fail within a year, so I buy another one and things like that. So when you're actually going out there and assisting people, helping with their product and things like that, it's powerful for them. It makes them feel like they're a part of something. And, you know, really, for instance, like at ADP, a big lightning in a bottle thing that we saw was that payroll managers very often felt like they were kind of on an island at their companies, particularly mid-sized companies. And when you put all of them together, suddenly they had this commiseration power. Even when it was that our product was down, the fact that they could talk to each other and know that everybody else was having the same problem they were, as opposed to in the past when they would just call and get a busy signal because the product was down and nobody would even say to them, hey, we're working on it. And so, community is so much that, right? So often the most powerful moments that I've probably been, or me and my teams have been able to provide for people are in times of crisis when we've said, hey, we don't know. We don't know when this is going to be fixed, but we're working on it. And that is a really powerful thing. And so a company would be silly not to have that. So I think that people are realizing, and particularly startups are realizing, that we need to be, there's a big movement called community-led. For years they talked about product-led. Community-led is having a really big moment right now. And it's that belief that, community ought to be the center pillar of your company. Like if you're not listening to the community of people who have a vested interest in your products and your people and whatever, then what are you doing,
And so it's beyond the user group, right? When I hear you talking about this, sometimes when we talk about the bookkeepers that are using the different pieces of software, we might have used to call those user groups, right? This is the next evolution of it, but really making companies, like you said, that pillar, that center pillar is how you're building around it. So let's talk a little bit, we're talking about news. We're going to sort of mush together our show this week with you. So, I think 7 years ago, I was working at a web agency where I had companies come to me and say, we want our own we want our own user groups section, or we want our own community, and would spend $10,000 and no one would use it, right? It would just be crickets. People might sign on, create accounts, or they automatically create the accounts for their customers, but no one ever used it. So how is this going to be different now, right?
Well, so communities require dedicated people. One of the things that I would tell people when I would do speaking events and whatnot, as they considered their path to community, was you need a community manager, right? It can't be that you say, this person at our company does the community 20% of the time or something. You don't have a community manager if that's the case, even if it's 50% of the time. And I've seen that play out a number of times. So communities that die almost every time die because they don't have dedicated stewardship. So, I've been fortunate. And so when you're saying how's it different, for me, it's all the communities that we've worked on over time have succeeded because we had that. And so in certain cases, it was just me. And in other cases, I had upwards of 8 people, like I did at Higher Logic and things like that. So if you have the people, if you have the human power, and they earnestly want the community to succeed, it's going to succeed. So you also have to have the right people, right? And so a community manager is somebody who is curious, who is empathetic, right? Those two things right there, I'll take. If you're curious and empathetic, if you're the kind of person who, when you hear a question, you try to Google the answer, I like you, right? If you're the kind of person who, when they hear somebody's opinion, doesn't, even if it's contrary to their own, doesn't think this person is a jerk because they have a contrary opinion. I think, I want to know why they have that opinion. How did you arrive there? I care more about how you arrived at that opinion. Well, then you're a community manager, right? If you think that way.
Seeking that understanding among other people,
Absolutely. And being able to say, I am here to solve for the use case of every single person, right? And I know that sounds silly and it sounds like you can't do it, but everybody's point of view is valid, regardless of whether you agree. You don't have opinions. You're community manager, you're setting your opinions aside. You are trying to solve problems for people, regardless of where they come from, and help them get back through their day so that they feel appreciated and they feel like they have somebody advocating for them. And so to make that roundabout to how is it going to be different, I don't know what happened with those communities that your company built. My guess would be that they didn't end up with apt stewardship of those communities, and that's why they didn't end up with the kind of robust engagement that you'd be looking for. So what I always say to people is, online community always works when you focus on it. And I haven't seen it fail in the case where it was properly tended to.
Well, I think part of it is training the users too, training those community members to use it. I'm part of I'll take one community that I'm a part of is a national national organization of women volunteers, right? And it took the staff, when that community was launched, it took the staff a while to not just be helpful, right? Just to say, oh, Sarah, you're looking for this, let me just email it to you. It's Sarah, take a look at this page of the community board in like the social media managers for your chapter, right? Or something like that. It took a while for that engagement to happen. But again, they had that team. And I think where it failed, where I saw it fail, were the smaller nonprofits, the smaller businesses, sometimes just a couple of people who are working on that. Maybe they were thinking, maybe, I'm from Vermont, we talked a little bit about that. And so a skiing term is you get ahead of your skis, right? You may be getting a little further ahead of where you're prepared for. So with our show, we do talk to a lot of small business owners. We talk to a lot of nonprofits too. We also talk to a lot of, last week we had someone who is a climate activist too. Okay, so for, getting back to the question, so for nonprofits, small teams that may not have a good group, what would you say is a good way to start as they build up and maybe stay dedicated to having a community and really making it work?
Well, I think to build up, you have to find your audience, right? You can't just create a community and expect people to join it. You have to know that you have an audience who cares about it.
Damn marketing things,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say that if you want to start, you should start on social media. Start on Twitter or something, and depending on what your use case is, and find your audience and do it in earnest. One of the things I always talk about is like, if you go out there and you care about what other people have to say, they're going to care about what you have to say. And so if you wanted to test that out, that's the thing, is that like we're thinking of everything as community these days. 10 years ago, I would have been pretentious about the notion that Twitter is community. I would say no, community is community. It's absolutely untrue. No, I mean, like people, I see it all the time. There's people who talk about, oh my God, Twitter is so toxic, and it's like, well, actually, if you consume Twitter in a way that is part of you found your tribe on there, you might not see something negative all day because you've found the right people. They have similar interests to you. So if you've got a nonprofit or something and you really want to create a community, go out onto social media, find the people, go care about what they're saying, care about what they've got going on. They'll care about you. Cultivate some conversation and then transition it into a community if you believe that's the way to go. Some of these smaller folks, I've seen some people have really great success with mighty networks. It's very different to what I do. But these smaller communities there's a lot of resources there with that. And I'm not trying to pimp anything. I don't sell anything. I have no relationship with mighty networks. I've just seen some people have some really good success with that kind of thing. So a smaller organization can use tools like that. Circle is another one that's good for small organizations trying to do community. Very cost effective. And so it doesn't always have to be enterprise. It's just about bringing people together. So you just got to make sure you know what they want to be getting together about, and if it aligns with what you want to be getting together about, then you start from there.
Now, what about feeding? So let's talk about feeding the community, right? You have these great community managers answering questions, engaging in conversation, helping people feel welcomed and a part of this community. What about putting out content?
So, what they say is, consistently, what they say and what I've experienced is, at the beginning of a community, you're working to provide a huge percentage of the content, like 90%, right? And your dream is that, others will provide more of the content at the beginning, but, you really just have to get out there and give them a lot of stuff to consume. You want to give people simple ways to engage. Come up with a question that anyone can answer. What was the most valuable thing that happened in your career? What is the best piece of advice you've ever given? What was the best day of your career? What was the worst day of your career? Something that any person can engage with, and start from there.
And what about indexing? Because once a community gets really big, how do you suggest organizing all of that content?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of ways of doing things. The current community that we're working with is on Discourse, which is not to be confused with Discord. Discourse is an open source enterprise community platform. Actually, it could be enterprise, it could be just very simple. Depends on what you want to do with your open source configuration. There's a million plugins. Sorry.
That's okay.
I lost track. What was the original question?
Organizing content.
Right, okay. So In terms of how we organize content, we're using Discourse, which is an open source community platform. It has a lot of configurations that you can use, right? And tagging and categories are the way that you go there. And so we've started very intentfully with our Discourse implementation to say, okay, here are the spaces that we want, the categories that we want. Each of them are going to be aligned by these tags, and then our audience's engagement is going to tell us what other tags that we need to create. So the tags themselves become the skeleton of the community, and they can actually be called out into their own kind of sections, the way that tags are organized. So if you click on a tag, it can become a feed. But any of these platforms has a number of ways for you to organize content. It's just a matter of really, really working to learn the platform that you've chosen.
Right.
So I've worked with a number of platforms for years. I was a Jive person. Jive isn't around anymore, but I worked at Higher Logic for several years. Higher Logic now has Vanilla under its umbrella for corporate. I've been really excited to learn Discourse and all the stuff that they do there. The exciting part about picking a platform vendor is just everything that they can do, everything that you can do differently. And this can kind of segue into our next piece of conversation than what you might see on, for instance, social media, So, one of the benefits of Discourse itself, and again, I don't have any skin in Discourse's game, it is open source, you can get it for free, is that it's been around for 10 years, and as our vendor talks about all the time, the agency that we work with to configure it, Cantaris, somebody has tried everything in Discourse at some point and come up with a plugin or a control for you to use, and that's really exciting because a lot of community platforms are kind of that walled environment. Like, you ever talk to a developer or an engineer about iOS versus Android? And so an engineer wants an Android phone because it's the possibilities are endless in their view. Whereas I have an iPhone because I don't need to have endless possibilities on my phone. In my community, I want endless possibilities, right? I want the ability to be nimble and iterate at any moment. And it's very exciting to work with a platform that allows me to do that. And so in terms of how you organize things, I am a huge advocate for Discourse for anybody who wants to use it. And again, anybody can sign up for it. It doesn't cost anything.
Right. Well, that's a great tool of the week. We were going to talk about a different tool of the week, though.
Oh, yeah.
Because you keep talking about our community. So we're here. We are going to talk about this new community that launched just this week, 48 hours ago, I think.
Monday,
72
Is it Wednesday?
Hours? It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday. So we are recording ahead of time. So let's talk about the tool of the week that we wanted to talk about is the Social Pulse community.
Yes.
So I know a little bit about it. I've been recruited as a creator for it or a contributor, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's explain what the Social Pulse community is.
Social Media Pulse community.
Social Media Pulse,
yes,
sorry.
And it's not to be confused with the Facebook group that Agora Pulse created a couple years ago. That being said, the success of that Facebook group is the impetus for this foray into a standalone community. So Social Media Pulse is very exciting. I came onto Agora Pulse just under a year ago. Actually started interviewing just over a year ago. Took a long time. It was a long interview process. I got booked a lot of hours with Michael Angeletta and Emmerich. We kind of had this vision of, okay, there's some properties that Agora Pulse owns, the Social Media Manager School in particular, the Social Media Lab in particular, and there's this sentiment in this industry that Michael and Emmerich had been feeling, which is people saying to them, nobody's out there kind of taking responsibility for us as a profession. There's not anybody out there aggregating jobs for us. There's not an ability for us to access people who are really successful or whatever, or I feel like when I could maybe walk up to them at a conference like this or something, and then not to impugn this wonderful conference, but I don't know that I can day-to-day access people and learn from them and everything like that. And so we had all this anecdotal evidence. I come in, and the first thing that you do as a community manager is you do discovery. And I tend to do discovery longer than the average person, just because I really love it. And in this case, it was an industry and field that I was in a decade ago. And so I was kind of like, I want to get back in the mix. I know a lot has changed in 10 years, and so I don't know anything, right? And the players are all new people and everything like that. So I had a tremendous amount of fun interviewing people, talking about their challenges. What could have helped you when you were coming up? Right? Like, those kind of questions were informing us as to what we need to put in this community, because we want to give people a shortcut to expertise. And so what we've put together with Social Media Pulse, and that's socialmediapulse.community, not .com, but if you go to .com, it'll also go to socialmediapulse.community, it'll redirect. Social Media Pulse is, like I said, it's an extension of that Facebook group, an extension of the Social Media Manager School. It's the next generation of it. It's all in one place. We have a learning management system for our courses. Our courses from the school have now turned into Pulse Academy, and all 7 courses have been updated. So if you are working on those courses, they're all new. There's new information in there. They're looking good. Ruth Inman, Dr. Ruth Inman, in fact, don't call her Dr. Ruth. If you're under 30, you don't know what that means. Or maybe under 40. She's great. We hired her out of academia, and I can't believe that we did. Hopefully she doesn't realize it's a mistake, or decide it's a mistake, rather. It's not a mistake. But Dr. Inman is really great, and she is going to make the offerings in the school so robust, and they're going to be equipped with the stuff we were talking about before, the certifications, backed up by our assessment advisory board, our social media advisory board. And it's going to be a really powerful thing. And it's just one element of this community. It's all free, by the way. There's no cost to this. You don't need to be an AgoraPulse customer. Being an AgoraPulse customer is completely aside from what Social Media Pulse is about. You can be a customer of anyone. You can come in and talk about a competitor of ours and a solution you achieve with that competitor, as long as you don't then say, like, go get it for $99 or something, like, as long as you're not advertising it, because we're not going to be in there advertising Agorapulse, so we don't want any, so nobody else should be advertising anything else. And so that's kind of trustworthy environment that we want to breed in there. It's a place for you to learn. It's a place for you to join mastermind groups with peers, to talk to people who've been where you are and are now someplace even better, to help you get to that place, to put you in a position where you can have candid conversations with people, sometimes off the record. Deb Mitchell, who's the reason we're here right now, right? She facilitated this booking here. She's running our mastermind groups. She's going to be setting up meetings on the side for people to go and have what you talked about user groups before. It's kind of a version of user groups, right? But it's bringing people together in real life, virtually online, helping them talk through things, giving them that person that they can bounce things off of without having to come to social media marketing world or anything like that. Because I think one thing we forget when we're at events like this is it costs a lot. A lot of people can't afford to come here. They can't afford the ticket. They can't afford the flight. I know when I worked as a social media manager, I couldn't have afforded to take the 4 days off. I was hustling. I was barely making it, and so we want to provide that opportunity for people to feel like somebody cares about their career development. It's not to say that people don't, but like, we want it to be the place for you to go to say, okay, I know that when Instagram changes its algorithm, there's going to be a news article that Christine writes about it. Christine Gritman, who's our senior director or senior editor of content. And I know that when something changes fundamentally in a product, we're going to update our courses for you to get certified on that, update your certification. I know that I can find people who can help me out. And then, like, extrapolate it out down the road, I know that I can find a job there. I know that my certifications, the time and effort that I put into things, can help me get a better place of employ, get a better sense of like how to get through my day and things like that. And that I've got a community, I've got a group of people, quite simply, who are there invested in me. And then I, like me as the user, I want to invest back in that.
And I have to say, as being recruited as a contributor to this, we see, and the others that I know who have been recruited too, we see it as a way to advance our industry, right? Like you said, not everybody can come here, and even when we're here, there's 2,000 people here, and a lot of people here are introverts, right? A lot of people are very social and animated on a live stream, but when it comes to being around people, it's a little harder to ask questions or introduce yourself. And so this is going to be our way to support our people that are coming up, right? To be the people who help lift others up and succeed in this, because there's a lot of bad social media managers out there, and we want to make sure there's a lot of good social media managers out there.
Absolutely.
And all of us can benefit from having this interplay. Like, hey, I may have a more advanced question about something than someone who may just be getting started, but someone else can say, hey, Sarah, I saw you do this. Can I ask you about it? And so I think this is going to be a great place for all of us to come together and be able to have that exchange, maybe even have virtual coffees with people around the world. That's what's great about here. I think every day I've met at least 3 people from a different country.
Yeah.
And something like Social Media Pulse is going to be a way for us to do that. Right?
Yeah, you mentioned user groups before, and we have like software user groups to thank for this industry. Over time, I worked for a time with IBM, who has had software user groups that have been meeting for 30 years, right? And at a certain point, somebody said, "What if there was a place for us to go online in between our meetings?" And boom, the community industry is born, right?
Exactly.
And so, to hear you also say that you consider it a service that you give back to the people who are in the industry, and it is cyclical, right? And then it helps you. It really, in my purview, I was talking to a friend of mine who may work with us on a couple things, and he works with associations, and he said, you're kind of an association, right? Like, so don't poo-poo what I'm offering as a solution, because you are an association. You just don't have dues. You're not taking dues. You're out there. You're saying, I want to upskill this industry. I want to make sure these people get where they need to go. I want to make sure that they have all the skills out there, and like you said, that everybody's doing a good job or a better job or has an opportunity to do a better job, get more money, get more clients, get a better position, that kind of thing.
Right. That's great. So how do people find it again?
Socialmediapulse.community.
Community. Okay, great. So let's wrap up. We close with, how can people get in touch with you or find you on social media?
Yes, I'm Paul Bradley, Community Manager. Paul Bradley, CMGR, on both Twitter and Instagram.
Okay.
Those are probably good spots to get me. Paul at socialmediapulse.community is also an email that you can use.
Great.
And
Great, terrific. And as you all know, you can find me at Sarah Monroe VT across social media. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, drop a message and let me know that you saw me on Social Chatter. So we're going to let Christian wrap up the show, and we'll see you all next week on Thursday. I am away from my calendar, away from my email, but Christian will let you know who our guest will be next week, and we'll see you Thursday. Thanks.
thank you.
So with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode 335 of Social Chatter with Sarah Monroe, Doreen Morin-van Dam, and Paul Bradley. If you want to read, watch, or listen to that update, just go to socialchest.com/SC335. With that, we'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.